You might want to leave sometime tonight. How much time do I have?
We're open until like 8:39. And we have a policy here. Like we tell people, come when you can and leave when you have to. We're just glad that you're in our space. So.
And I'm the pastor here. This girl can talk. And so they ain't scared.
Okay, cool. Well, hi, everybody.
Hello.
So, I'm Syreeta. They did a great job introducing me, and I just want to thank you. So if I get a little emotional, we do emotions here. I didn't know how much I needed this. Can I just say that?
Oh.
I'm gonna start not how I intended to start, but I need to start it this way. From the time I pulled up and I saw, the children outside, and then I'm walking up and everybody's high and so welcoming. And I remember, I remember going to visit my mom when she was in treatment, and in that same atmosphere of like love and acceptance and family, like it's just all, I don't know. I didn't know how much I needed to feel that. And it's very unique, I would say, to the recovery community. Like I'm all over. I go many places and, oftentimes people are happy to see me, but the feeling of community, just, I don't know. And then downstairs I met little baby Rosie, and I'm like, here's a little baby Rosie over there, and Rosie and family, and then Dave, just the organic conversation. And one thing that I've learned is that the two universal themes, love and pain. And it's like, it doesn't really matter like what ethnicity, what gender, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. So I feel very, very loved. I don't know how to explain it. I just do. And thank you for that. I do. So they'll make it a little bit easier. Now I say I might get emotional a couple times because I'm thinking a lot about my mom. So let me go back to my origin story, as they say. I grew up in the 80s, and I had, and I had not one, but two drug addicted parents, okay? So my mother, let me see, I was 8 years old when we were taken from her, and I was the oldest. So she had me when she was 15. So she was pregnant at 14, had me at 15. So in a lot of ways, we kind of grew up together, right? So our relationship had a lot of different layers. And so her and my father, both of their first, I was the firstborn from both sides. So I have no other like full siblings. So the rest of my siblings are half siblings. So I have 3 other sisters, but from my mom, so she had a boyfriend who was at first selling drugs, then started using the drugs. And so this was her entryway. She was already smoking marijuana, but that was her entryway into everything. So I'm gonna share a couple of cultural pieces because I think that it's important. So my mother was what we would consider, with our different shades of melanin, a dark-skinned woman. And then my father was what we would call light skinned, and he had like these hazel eyes. Now, the reason why I mention this is because my grandmother, which is my mom's mom, didn't like him because he was too light. Like, I don't know. And where'd he get those eyes from? right? So I'm like, where'd he get them from, right? And so I'm like, okay. So because she didn't like him, she wasn't, I don't think, particularly fond of me either. And my mom had some sexual abuse things happen to her, like, but from her brother though. So she was in the house, dark skin, was not the favorite. She was considered ugly. I don't know. We look alike. I don't know, that's my mom. And so I was like, oh my goodness, really? But it was the whole thing because she was dark. And I'm like, this is interesting, right? So she was ugly. So she had to stay in the house, and she was the one that had to stay in the house and keep the kids and do the stuff. And then there was a more beautiful sister who was the older sister, who most people thought for the longest time was my mother. So this is how deep this went. Like, it was like, oh no, you have to be her daughter and not hers. So you can imagine the pain, like that goes along with that. So fast forward, because things was happening to her in the home, and then this brother had friends, and my father was one of his friends. So they ended up, I don't know if you would call it dating, but because she was kind of like in the house. So I don't know. He would come over and visit, but that's kind of how. And so that stopped the situation, which nobody knew about, with the brother, because they were friends and all of that. Then he was like, oh, she can get pregnant, that kind of stuff. So, so we fast forward. She told my grandmother what was happening. My grandmother looked at her and said, that boy isn't doing anything to you. Go on upstairs. And just like with disdain, like, not you. Like, it wasn't a whole. So years later, I did ask her about that, because, I was very upset about it. Because I'm like, seriously, your daughter tell you something, you should believe her, right? It doesn't matter who it is. So that hurt her. So she had a lot of pain over her life. Like, it started very young. And so it doesn't really surprise me as I look back that she ended up, using drugs, because I look at the family she was born into, like your mom, then her father was an alcoholic. I mean, I remember he used to tell these stories, but he would be talking to himself. But I was a kid, so I thought it was funny. But he would just be drunk, and then he would fall, and then he hit his head, and then there'd be blood, and we just knew to clean up the blood. Like, the things that you learn, like, oh, he fell again. Granddad's falling again. Like, oh, could you go get mine? And then my sister would call it. I got a couple sisters that suffer with alcoholism, and will say, could you go get my coffee? And I'm like, coffee? What is really in there? And it wasn't coffee, but that's what she called it, because she had to have it everywhere she went, and I'm like, this is interesting. So that's a little bit of her childhood. And then my father was an only child. He was an only child, but both of his parents were dark skinned. And he was very light with those hazel color eyes. And so the grandmother on the father's side wanted to take him in as her own and let her younger, her son, and then they got married and they only lived together a couple days, but let them live their life. So this talks about the family dynamic. And so because he was lonely a lot, so he was looking for family. And my mother, she was one of, like, I think six or seven. So that whole family, they lived just houses away from each other. And so because he was raised by grandparents, that kind of helped add some stability to his life. But then his mom ended up, it was heroin. And then later on, she would like do drugs with him and stuff. So he would tell me later on how that kind of messed with him, because he could never do anything right. But then if he had drugs, she would do drugs with him. And so that longing, or that sense of belonging. So I'm looking at that. So I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna go back to the late 80s. My mom, her parental rights were terminated. And I remember being picked up from Madison Elementary. It's not Madison anymore, but it's still on Madison in Grand Rapids. And they took me to court. They picked me up in a police car, first of all, from school. And they did that with my sisters. And I have two sisters that still, the sirens, like, it caused a lot of trauma. So we were 8, 4, 1, and an infant when we were taken from her. The last two, I'm pretty sure they were born addicted to crack. That was my mom's drug of choice. So I remember them saying things. They had me in the courtroom. I remember the courtroom, and they're saying the things that my mother was saying, that she was very upset. They came and took pictures of the house. Of course, well, it was a house where people congregated to get high. Okay, so there's stuff all around. It wasn't very clean, although she would clean up, though. She would clean up when she was, but it was a party house. It was just stuff kind of all over. And of course, that's when they showed up and took pictures. And those were the pictures they were showing in court. And she was trying to explain, well, it's not always like that. So nevertheless, long story short, she used to go to this place called River Valley. I remember that, somewhere over by Leonard. And she said that was like a country club. And I didn't know what she meant by that, but I guess there's different types of treatment centers. And she said that one was like a country club. So she tried in and out to get clean, and it just wouldn't, she just couldn't stay clean. So we're in court, and I remember the person saying, she responded when they said we didn't have any food, which wasn't uncommon. And she would say something like, what do you want me to do? Sell a piece of my... And one of the attorneys looked over and saw me and said, wait a minute, can we take her daughter out of here? Like at this point. And I don't remember her name. I just remember she sat outside, and as soon as we made it outside, I just started crying. And she comforted me. And I don't know who she was, but I just was like, oh my goodness. And that was the first time I had cried. Well, I never went back to my mother's house after that because they were terminating her rights and they made her a legal non-mother. And I didn't really understand that. It was just, and my sisters were not allowed to call my mother mom anymore. The 3 sisters had the same father. So they all went with their father and stepmother. Now, mind you, I told you, he was a drug dealer and he was also using drugs. So I didn't understand that. And then so was my father. So I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? I'd rather live with my mother. Of course, that's how I felt. But I do know that there is a God, because I really believe I went to live with my father only because of my stepmother, not even because of him, because we are still close to this day. That became my mother. So it was a year. We used to do Bethany Christian services, have visits. By the time I was 9, her rights were completely terminated. I lived on Charles Street, which is over by Cherry. And then I don't know if that was the Bullock House. There was something over there on Eastern, over there. But anyway, all in Grand Rapids. If you're not familiar with Grand Rapids, none of this probably I don't know where that is. But I used to walk around the corner to go visit her. And she was in and out of jail, in and out of treatment. And she always thought that she'd be able to get us back. Well, that was what they told her, but it never happened. And I really believe for her not having us, that kind of lost her, her motivation was just gone. And it was kind of well, whatever. But I went to visit her at a treatment place and I would write. That's all I could do was write. Because also, I don't know if I know in our culture, African-American, BIPOC, whatever you want to call it, is, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And also, I had nobody to talk to. So it wasn't like I could go and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Or, I'm really hurt by this. It was like, you do what I say and that's that. So, but I needed an outlet. So I would just write. And my mother would write me, from jail. She was in and out of jail. But my father and my stepmom would allow me to go visit her. And it was just around the corner, so I could walk around there. And I remember going to visit her and I wrote this poem, and the poem was called Crack. Now, I learned about poetry. I was in elementary at the time, and we learned about personification. I was in elementary. And then if you don't know what that is, this is strictly from my memory from being in elementary, it was when you give an inanimate object or an object person-like qualities, right? Or people-like qualities. So I said, okay. So I wrote this poem called Crack, and it was like, I'm a dangerous journey with no return back. I'm a grave digger, but you could call me Crack, right? And then Crack was talking. I'm little when I wrote this, 9 years old. So that's what I wrote at 9. That was the very first poem, which I put in the book because I'm like, yep, that was when I was 9, I wrote that poem. But I went and I had my poem printed out and I read it to my mom. And this is how I know, that love, drugs do something to a person. But when the love is there, it's there. She looked at me. She stood up. She said, wait a minute, my baby got something to say to y'all. In the recovery, right? So I get up with my little paper and I read my poem. After I get done reading it, because she in the poem. Now, I told you I was writing my stuff, right? She's in the poem. I get done reading my poem. She said, I inspired that poem, y'all. That was I inspired and then I was like, okay. But then they all standing up. I mean, there's tears and people hugging and just, oh my goodness. And oh, that helped me so much. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just little. And then, but pivotal moment, because I was 9. And if she had, why you write that? Or no, take that out of there or whatever else, I don't know that I would have continued. So which brings me here today. Now, I've visited my mother many times. I've looked for her. I've gone to different crack houses. And even though there was a number of times when I became older, that commercial where it's like people reunite and there's like this green grass and there's like the sun shining and stuff. Yeah, and their things are wonderful. Yeah, and they running in slow motion. I literally thought that when I was grown and we could be together and something happened to her, she never quite got, but she was raped and shot when I was in the 10th grade. And so she became a paraplegic. Remember, she had me young at 15. So she became a paraplegic around age 30. Okay. So she got stitches down the side of her face. They hit her with a gun. And then, later on, it was revealed that it had something to do with like drugs. Like, anyway, so nevertheless, so she was a paraplegic. So she ended up in long-term care facilities because of, ulcers and stuff. And if you're still using, you're not really relieving pressure and laying down and doing the stuff that you need to do. So fast forward, I'm living on my own. I say, oh, she can come live with me. And I'm thinking it's going to be that thing, that all the things that we never had, that we never got to do, we were just going to pick up like no time, right? And then she won't use drugs anymore. And I will never forget when I was getting the phone calls that people was coming in and out of my house because her room was upstairs. And so she couldn't make it down the stairs. So I would leave the door unlocked, like the front door unlocked, just in case, And she would be calling people, to bring her drugs and stuff. And then I had a son and I'm like, I can't, what if something, like I can't lose my son like you lost us. I just wasn't understanding. And then she finally told me, well, I'll do what I want to do in my room. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, plot twist. I never saw this coming. Like, why are you, no, right? That's not the picture. I'm like, wait a second. No, Mom, right? So all these things, I'm like, oh, and then I would just be so hurt. And I remember she could braid very well. She would braid hair. And I will never forget the time she was braiding my hair. And that takes hours. And she kept stopping. And I'm like, why is she stopping? I turn around and she has her pipe. She's braiding it. And I said, wait a second. I'm like, you can't, it just, when I say the things that we just, and I'm like, Mom, you breaking my heart. Like, you don't like, you can't stop. And so one day I thought I would be smart-mouthed because I thought I just had enough. And then I asked her, I looked at her, I said, oh, she was doing what she was doing. And I looked at her, I said, well, can I have some? And she looked at me with disdain. Now my mother, let me tell you something about my mother. I think my smile and my joy that I got from her, I think if you could inherit such things, I probably inherited it from her because no matter what she was doing, and I mean no matter what, even drugs, I would walk in the room, she would stop whatever she was doing and she would just smile. She was like, hey, baby, and then she might go back to what she was doing, but she would stop and give me full attention. So you get used to that kind of thing. So when I asked her, I said, well, can I have some? She looked at me and she took her little saucer and her stuff. She said, no, go get your own. And the look on my face, I was like, and then she said, no. What I meant was, no, you better not do it. And da-da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, Lord, that's when I knew that over the years, things had just gotten worse because she would have never, because she used to beg me in the beginning. And that's why my book is called The Crack Chronicles, Volume 1, Dissection of a Demon, because she would beg me. I would see the torment. It looked very tormenting. Like nothing about it looked fun. She would beg me never to be her. Like she was like, please don't. I can't, she would be crying. And I'm like, well, why can't you say I can't? And she would just be so for her to go from that to go get your own, I'm like, no, thank you. Right? Like, no, no, I won't. But kids learn two ways, what they're taught or how they're treated. And we really observe our environment. So because it never, ever looked glamorous, I believe she saved me from that life, like in that way, because she would say that this doesn't feel good, it's torment, I can't stop. And I knew she loved me. I knew she loved us a lot. And then that was like high competition for us. And I knew it had to be something very powerful. So that hurt me when she was like, no, go get your own. I'm like, ooh, okay. Took a turn. So, I'm helping her. We live together off and on. It doesn't work out. So finally, she has her own apartment and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, my father over the years, he maintained, like he still struggled back and forth, right? He struggled back and forth. Ended up when my stepmom, and she's technically not my stepmom because after she divorced him, she kept me. She was like, you go, she stays, right? And he would use me to get back in the house when she kept trying to leave him before because he got full custody of me. And as a wife, she didn't have custody, only he did. So she would let him back in because he would have me like out in the streets with him, wandering around, living in homeless shelters. And I'm like, every time he would get mad, he would take me. And I now know that it was so he could get back in the house because she cared about me. And the last time she was like, no. He's like, well, I'm calling the police. She said, please do. And she said, and when you call them, I'm going to tell them exactly why she's not going anywhere. She was like, my daughter. I was already packing my stuff because I knew the routine. And she was like, no, you go back downstairs. She said, my daughter's not going anywhere. And he looked at her like he saw her for the first time, left, never came back, and never tried that again. So she kept me after she divorced him. She ended up divorcing him and she kept me. And so when my mother was shot, though, she was the one that drove me all around looking for her too. I remember she took off work that day. So why I'm passionate about this, and before my mom passed, I would, when she would be in recovery, I would go visit her, or when she was staying sometimes in homeless shelters, like down at Degage, at different missions. Sometimes she would have sores and I would take medical supplies. And because they weren't supposed to have visitors, they would just hope they'll let me in the door with my medical supplies. And there would be other people, like whether they had abscesses or whatever they had. And I would just bring my supplies and just, and take care of them. And they would just be like, they not supposed to have visitors, but that door on the side over there open, going up to the, and I'm like, yeah, I know. And I just, we don't see anything you doing. And then I would just go and then treat them. So I spent a lot of time, but I saw how they were like pulling for her, encouraging her in the support. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And so even though I didn't use drugs, I did still end up in some precarious situations because if you're at the house where people come to get high, who's watching the children? So that opens you up to being victimized in other ways, which happened because who's watching the children? Okay. And then not only that, but then when I got older in my environment, there was a lot of like drug dealers. And so in my mind, I felt like I only had two options. Either I use drugs or I be the girlfriend of a drug dealer. Like that was my way out. I didn't really understand like about education and all that kind of stuff. It's just for me growing up. I'm like, and then I need a drug dealer that was not like my sister's father who also used drugs, but one that didn't. So in my mind, this is how I'm reconciling in my mind, like how I get out of here. I'm gonna either be this or that. And I'm like, okay, I might have to put up with some stuff over here, but I don't have to do drugs and all this other kind of stuff. So that's the route I chose. And then he ended up getting life. They gave him life for selling drugs. And I remember I was pregnant at the time. He's not my son's father, but it was very stressful because, when you being followed by the DEA and all that kind of stuff, then I had to go to court. Like it was so stressful and I was like, how did I end up here? Like, I was like, I didn't do anything, but they said, oh no, when you keeping money and all this money that you have, that's called money laundering. I didn't know any of this kind of stuff. I'm just thinking I'm helping because I always wanted to help people. So I said, what I can do is I'm pretty honest, right? So I'll keep the money. I'll do the books. I don't know. I'm just, I did the ledgers. They did. People, oh, you got very nice clothes. I can't afford. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh Lord. Then I would go to school. I was very smart at school, right? And I was just keep the money. When I look back, I was so, oh my. Naive, right? But again, we don't have a full frontal lobe before age 26, sometimes 27, depending on the literature. 35. So, yeah, 35. Look, we gonna get, right? So I just did, I'm just trying to, and I'm thinking I'm helping build an empire. I don't know. I'm just, oh my goodness. And I'll never forget the agent, I remember his face. I don't remember his name, but I remember he had dark hair. And he asked me questions. And so my mom also didn't like liars, right? So she also didn't lie to me, which was interesting. So she would tell me stuff. Anything I wanted to know, I could ask her. And she'd tell me. But I remember he came to the house and he asked me some questions. And I just started telling him everything that I did. And he looked at it, he was like, he was like, wait a minute, she doesn't seem to, he said, well, okay. And I remember I had to go, I'm on the stand testifying, okay? And I'm literally, the other attorney was like, ma'am, what you're describing, you were a mule. Like you were, and I said, I don't know what that is. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then they said, did they offer you a deal or anything? I said, no. He said, they asked me a question. I was supposed to tell the truth. I'm under oath. And then he's looking at the judge and they was like, well, can we have a recess? Because they were like, you are, like, I see cuffs in your future because you just, all this stuff that you said, right? But yeah, and then I didn't realize though at the time, I didn't really realize at the time, but they told me that like, we're not after you. You were honest from the very beginning, but we see a lot of young women have gotten caught up like this, and just because, and they said this because I was just honest and I told on myself. I said, well, I just was telling on myself because this is all the things that I know, right? And it was the weirdest and it was so stressful. And they said, look, so we don't have your name. You're not on any documentation or whatever. That's why we didn't want to offer you a deal. Like that could have further other implications, in your life. And I didn't really understand any of that again. I was just telling the truth. So he said, no, we're not going that route. He said, however, if we hear about you again, I said, I'm cured. You don't have to, I don't even know, hear about me. I don't know what she's talking about. I wish this didn't happen. I'm like, I'm cured. Whatever it is, I'm done. Okay. I learned my lesson. Okay. And so I was told the truth. So again, along the way, my grandmother took me to church. I forgot this part. She used to take me to church. She used to sit on the pew in the Baptist church. And I believe that there were deposits made. I believe that there were people praying for me. I do, like people that I don't even know about, because just knowing the family and all of my mother's siblings, all of them, all 6, 7, all of them drug addiction, all of them, nobody. Now there's just one of them that like did it for a very brief time and then turned his life around, but all of them. And then again, my father was the only child. So like both sides, I had the double, and then grandparents, except my mom's mom, but anyway, both grandfathers, alcoholism, drugs. My one grandmother, alcoholism, drugs. The one grandmother, she gambles, so that's kind of like a drug. And then my parents on both sides. So I kind of already knew that I better stay away from it. I can't even experiment or whatever because I probably will like it. And I like to do all things in excellence. So I can see myself, right? I would be great because I was trying to create a union for the drug dealer girlfriends. I was like, we need better working conditions, right? Let's get a union. I was so silly. Like, I really was. Isn't that terrible? And I'm like, it doesn't the word say you get, whoever needs grace, get more. Where sin does abound, grace. I look back and I see the grace because I'm like, wow, I just didn't know. I didn't know, but I will say that the heart was always pure. Like I said, I thought I was helping. I thought, let's unionize, let's do, because I'm also in school. So I'm like, hey, this should be a union because this is, okay. So the only way that I got out of that situation was because, again, he went to prison. They gave him life. Okay, so he went to prison. And I was like, whew, okay, don't have a drug dealer boyfriend. Okay, that's it. Check that out. Woo. And then I said, Then my mom, 16, remember, raped and shot. So I saw nurses. And I didn't realize at the time, if I had a money laundering charge and all that other stuff, I couldn't be a nurse. Like those type of charges. So I didn't even understand that back then, right? So I went and did like the CNA when I was 18 because I needed to make some money. And then I saw nurses, and I remember seeing nurses when my mom was at Mary Free Bed recovering. And then I said, oh, I could do that. So I did LPN because the waiting list was like 6 years to be an RN at community college. And I said, oh, I better be some kind of nurse because if I stopped going to school, I knew I probably wouldn't go back because I'm also first generation. So I didn't have, a forerunner, so I'm like, okay. And of course, school was hard. I would start and stop and start and stop. But LPN full time at GRCC, I could do it in 10 months. And I said, I could survive 10 months of anything, right? And I was young at the time. I was like 19 years old. So then I said, I'll go back. It took me 6 years to go back to get my RN. 6 whole years. Because you get to making money and you're like, how am I going to fit this in? Because I have this whole life I got to maintain. Well, I did not hook up with another drug dealer. I was cured from that. So I remembered the writing. So I would be writing and I'll write about different things. I wrote something called The Shakes. And that does deal with, I would say, being improperly touched and everything, but that's called The Shakes. So I would write these different pieces. And I remember going to visit my mother and I wrote something about domestic violence because that was another part of her life too. But the difference, I would say, I don't want to try to make a difference, is she was also a fighter because she grew up in a family where she kind of had to fight. So she would like fight back. But then I would say, well, why are you in this situation? Like, I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. Nevertheless, so I didn't really understand that piece either. But so I wrote something and so she would have friends. And I remember I would go visit her and she'll say, baby, read that one poem you wrote. And then, so I'd read my poems and then they start crying. And then she would just call me and say, hey, I need you to talk to this person or whatever else. So I think my mom had a lot of wisdom and things and helping people. And she didn't fully realize all her potential. I did lose mama. She died in 2015 at 51. She was a baby. Yes, she did. In my book, I have a poem I wrote called Graduation Night. Crack was that was all the time from the 80s, all the way up. And then she got this boyfriend and he was doing intravenous, and I think it was heroin or whatever. But, she'd been on pain medications anyway because of her being in the wheelchair and all the pain that comes from being paraplegic. But the needles, within 3 years, she was gone. So I remember the day I got the phone call and I'm rushing over there because she had, there's been a number of times where I had to go visit her in the hospital. I remember going to school down at GRCC from her bedside when she was in critical care. Just from her being in a wheelchair, having ulcers and MRSA and all other kind of stuff. Breast cancer, she had survived breast cancer. So she had been in the hospital a number of times. And so I go in there and, and I'm going to school. I wasn't letting anything stop me. I got my little uniform hanging in her closet. And then sometimes the nurses would take too long to do stuff. So I'm in there putting IVs in her and everything. I was like, I got it. I said, you go ahead and chart it, but you got one right here. I put a thing in there for you. They're like, okay, thank you. So I'm doing all this stuff. And so it wasn't uncommon, I guess I would say, to get a call. But when I pulled up and I saw that the ambulance, and I lived out in Kentwood at the time, and I thought about the amount of time, I was like, why is the ambulance still here? Like, that's not a good sign. And I found out all the things about death that I didn't want to learn that way. And the medical system, which is why they have to have a heartbeat and everything in order to transport the body. But they were working. And as I was walking in, they were pronouncing her. And because it happened at home, we had to wait for the medical examiner and all this kind of stuff. And her body was just on the floor. And it was just so traumatic. I just will never forget that. And I remember running out and laying in it was in the winter. We had the polar vortex that year. And I was laying on the ground because I just needed to feel something. Like, I felt like I couldn't feel anything. And then I remember getting angry because the cars were still driving. And I'm like, how is the world still going? I don't know if this might sound weird, but I'm like, don't you know that somebody beautiful is gone? Like, it was like, how is everybody still? And it was at my grandmother's house and in this neighborhood. And I'm like, everybody life, how? I was surprised that things just didn't stop just for a second or like shift. And I was like, this is weird. And I remember laying in the middle of the street. Now, I don't know why I laid in the middle of the street. And then my now husband, who was then my fiance, he's out looking for me. And then everybody's worried about me and everything. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Okay. So fast forward, of course, she didn't have any insurance, life insurance or whatever. And I had to make a decision. So I opted not to pay my mortgage because I had my house. And then I said, oh, well, you get to live in your house before you pay for it when you have a mortgage. So I'm like, I'll be able to make this up in a couple weeks, because burials are expensive. Everybody kept saying, well, just cremate her. And I couldn't. I said I just couldn't do it because I remember her telling me that if she ever died, how she wanted to die was that she didn't want to burn like in a fire, and then she didn't want to drown because she had this thing with water. And even though I knew that she was dead, I understood all of that, but the cremation thing, I just couldn't reconcile it in my mind. And people was like, well, you still have to live after this. I understand all that, but this is my mother. Let me do this I'm gonna be fine. Let me do this last thing to honor her. And then I realized that you had to pay separately for them to dig the hole. It was all this stuff. So I go to PNC, I will never forget this, with the papers from the funeral home, and I couldn't speak. I walked up, gave him the papers, and the man said, could I help you? And I stood there and started crying. He looked at the papers. He said, I'll be right back. And he went and got the manager, and they did something, and I was just standing there crying. Then the manager is out there, she's hugging me, and she said, oh, my father just passed 3 weeks ago. And I'm like, you're here? Because I was trying to figure out how you still keep going. I didn't know how to do that. So I did have some thoughts, some very serious thoughts after my mom passed. I remember laying in a ball in my son's room, and I had all these like tormenting thoughts, I would call them. And it was like a voice that was not my voice. And it was saying things like, kind of like the whole curse God and die type thing. Like it was reminding me, all that time that she came to my book launch. I published my book in 2013. And she came. I did it at the library, and she died in 2015. And he was like, all this stuff that you were doing for the recovery community, and now where's your mother? Like that type of stuff. And I'm like, these questions, I'm sad right now. Like these are not even my thoughts. It was some weird stuff. And I remember saying, because I couldn't get the thoughts to stop. They just kept going boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, wait a minute. And that's when I knew that the devil, I knew he was real. Now, I want to say, but I'm like, at this point, I'm like, okay, she's already dead, but you won't even let me grieve. Like, I'm at my weakest moment. And I remember saying this out loud. I said, oh, I'm just sad right now, but I will get up. And when I get up, I promise you there'll be nothing left standing in your kingdom by the time I'm finished. I was so angry. Like, it went from like pain to anger. Because I was just like, just let me cry. Just give me a few minutes to cry, and they wouldn't let up. And then it shifted from that to me having thoughts of not wanting to be in this life anymore. If you all get what I'm... And that was the scary part, right? Because I knew enough. I talked to my fiance at the time, and then he didn't really know what to do. So he called some other people, and then they were able to get me some help. I went to see a psychologist, which I thought I was going to see a psychiatrist because I wanted some pills. Because I didn't want to, I was like, I'm sick of this. I wanted some medication, and I didn't understand that psychologists couldn't prescribe. I said, where's my medicine? And then he was like, well, no, you're able to talk. And I said, I know we talking, but where's my medicine? And sometimes I would go and I would just cry. But then he was a believer, so he would open the Bible and read scriptures. It was the weirdest. I don't know how they found this person. Again, I think it was a divine connection because I wanted medicine, but he would let me cry and he would read scriptures. And I'm like, what is this? But it actually did help me. So that was the only time that I sought mental health care, but I needed it. So that gave me my interest in mental health. So after my mom passed, I literally stopped. When I say I snatched my hand away from God, I'm being very transparent. I shut it all down. I did not talk. I did not speak. I shut it all down. I was in so much pain because I'm like, I just don't understand this. Now, when people say, oh, are you angry, like angry at God? It wasn't necessarily, I would say, an anger at God, but I wasn't understanding how she could be gone and why we didn't have more time. like I'm like just a few more times, and I have dreams, and you didn't tell me that this was because I would have went here. And why couldn't you read the whole Bible? So I called on my way over there. I called my prayer warriors. I'm like, hey, we up against something. Could you pray? So even it didn't really even bother me that they was pronouncing her. I thought she would get up though. Like I don't know. All these things. And I'm like, I don't understand it. How you did it for this person or that person, right? So I went through all of that. So that's a lot about my mama, but she's a huge part of my life, right? So without her, I wouldn't be here. And I remember she brought me 2 cards. She missed my first graduation when I was graduating from GRCC. And so she brought me a card in advance. And I'm glad she did because she passed. So she wouldn't have been able to come to my, and she said, and it was a graduation card. I was like, Mom, I'm not even graduating yet. She said, but so you in school. And she said, and I'm not going to forget it. And she dated it and everything. So I have that card and then another card that I have that I keep with me and I read it. And one of the ones, it was a Christmas card, but she turned it into, it was a comfort card, but it said, talked about how the world is crazy, mixed up. But there you are in the middle of it all, being strong and brave and beautiful. And while most of the time you wonder if you're doing okay, the rest of us just looking at you with wonder. And I was like, oh, this is the perfect card, right? And then she was like, Merry Christmas. It wasn't a Christmas card. Like, she'll make her card. She was like, Merry Christmas. Like, so I got a Christmas card. Yeah, right? Yeah, she made it into, I'm like, okay, Mom, right? So I do want to say this, and then I want to share one of my poems with you, okay? I do want to say this. I feel so blessed, even though I'm in pain. I feel so blessed because I know I was loved. And part of I want to say, I don't know if it's a mission or why I need to get out and start speaking again, is because there's still children that they might not have the words, or they're still, like, as a daughter of drug addicts, to be able to say, I love you and I know that it was the drugs. Like, I understand that, but the only reason why I feel like I'm able to is because they had me so young. It was a period of time, like a large part of my formative years, I knew them without the drugs, right? So I remember the shift and I remember the change. And I know my sisters didn't have that. So their grief is a lot different than mine because I have the memories. And that's what I would always try to, like, tether them, I would call it, like, back to life or whatever. And to be that safe space for them where they could just be who they were around me, without judgment or without me throwing up, well, remember when you said this or remember when you said that, or, we would just love each other. When my mom passed, I finally feel brave enough years later to ask God some questions because I'm like, I don't really understand this. So he reminded me that everybody has a time, right? And that it was just her time. And then he also told me that she was done with this life. And I'm like, what you mean? I'm here. She ain't done until, and that's so young. But he said this to me and I will never forget it. And it was about prayer. Because I'm like, I pray for people. People call me. I go up to the hospital. People get well. I'm not understanding this, right? And he's like, if I love you, and I do, and I love her, whose prayer do I answer? You don't know what her prayer was to me. Living the life she's lived, being in the wheelchair, it was crack, now it's needles. Like, you don't know what the prayer was. And she still is in this family that seemed to not really know she was in that room. Right? Like, so what do you don't know what her prayer was to me in that time. So whose prayer do I answer, yours or hers? And I'm like, well, Big G. Touche. Oh, look, what they say, clock it. Yeah, well, Big G, clock it, right? I'm like, you right. That's why you and I'm me. Yeah, I guess. And then I was just thinking, I said, that's comforting to me. And then he reminded me that love is never wasted. He said, all that love and all that good stuff, and I'm going to see her again. So what else is there to say? She not suffering anymore, and she was suffering. Okay. She tried to act like she wasn't, but she was suffering. So I will say, I did get some, when I did my book launch in 2013, there was a couple of people that felt like some of my poems that I put in this book that I should not have said because my mother was in the room. But they also didn't have the backstory. Well, she's the one that inspired me to keep on writing, and she was proud of me. And she knew that I wrote my book. I gave her a copy and the part that she didn't like, that she didn't want me to have in there until my sisters said that they were fine with it, was the part about two of my sisters being born, what they called crack babies at the time. She was like, no. I said, I remember. I remember. Right. And I said, I told you I was putting it in there and I wasn't changing it. So we had that. But after she talked to my sisters, they were fine. It was whatever. And she started wearing a t-shirt and everything. Like she was very supportive. So my poem that I wrote called Crack Owes Me Reparations. I would like to share that with you. It's also in the book as well. But yeah, that's the one that I would like to share with you. And then I will open for like questions, if you have any questions. But again, before I start, I just want to say really quickly that I really do thank you. I thank you for allowing me the space to get this story. He's seen me a couple times. I don't tell this story like this with all these like details, but my mother was a part of the community. And one thing that I know is that once you a part of you, they never, you always a part of the recovery community. They don't disown you. Yeah, they don't disown you. So
She would have fit in real well.
She would have. Exactly.
We always open up our arms to children.
And that's what I feel. I was like, this is your community too, right? Yep. So thank you. So here is Crack Owes Me Reparations. I know all about vengeance and the therapy of time, but with pain as my only witness, I must collect this fine. Sorry. Siri.
How are you talking behind me also?
Siri. Let me turn. Here goes Siri. Wasn't that that weird? that was Siri. Talking shit, she was serious. Siri said, yes, yeah, it's a crime or a punishment. Nobody asked you, Siri. I had to turn the phone off. Don't you get started either, watch. Oh, let me take this watch. Because sometimes they try to communicate to each other. Hold on. Wasn't that funny? Yeah, you were like, wait a minute. I thought my daughter had got the call to come through because she was oh, I'm so sorry. That was Siri. Girl, mind your business. I turned the phone off so she won't do it. So I'll start over. Crack owes me reparations. I know all about vengeance and the therapy of time, but with pain as my only witness, I must collect this fine. For the mother I once had and the father I love so much. Crack, you made them fall prey and you hold them still within your clutch. So don't look at me like that as if you don't recall when 18 years ago today, you initiated their lifelong fall. I'm owed emotional and spiritual repair for the virginity you stole because my father needed to feel you and felt that I should fund his Jones. I'm owed cosmetic surgery for the keloid on my left knee because mama had one of her parties and left broken glasses to comfort me. I want the countless returned layaways, because mama always put you first, for the times of shut off water when I couldn't wash or quench my thirst. I want the full course meals for the times we had no food and the times I walked barefoot because I had no shoes. I want the childhood I never had and the life that wasn't mine. For all that should have been, crack, you owe me hefty fines. I am owed unlimited strength, for you have made my father weak. For weeks he'll feed on you. For days he will not eat. Crack, you took away his smile, the one thing that belonged to me. See, for you, he sold my car and all I have left is his memory. I haven't seen daddy in 5 years. I don't even know if he's alive. He hit rock bottom 7 times, but still reveres you as some prize. Crack, release my daddy. Make him the man that he once was. Return to March of 1988 before you became his only love. Shall I sue the federal government? 'Cause someday, crack, you will pay me. I keep an itemized statement, for I must live your debts daily. This is my final stand, so I speak with desperation for a future that will never be. Crack, you owe me compensation. Will you dispossess my family and free them of their habits? Release the fiends and the thieves. Don't keep them tricks and addicts. You've been around for far too long. Yes, you hurt me way too much. Your fascination with my lineage strongly resembles sadistic lust. You enticed me with your money, then you trapped me within your hell. You took the only man I loved and gave him life in a federal cell. Will you leave me nothing? I want success without the shine. I demand vast compensation. Produce all that should be mine. I want proper nourishment for the sugar sandwiches I ate. I mean, heal me for times I got sick when we didn't have clean plates. I need the trips to Cedar Point I can never take with my mother, 'cause you made her your slave when you knew how much I loved her. I want all the rites of passage, the small things to brighten my day. I demand every single word mama was too doped up to say. Restore my cousin's innocence. She was only 5 years old when her older cousin raped her, transmitted disease, and marked her soul. Isn't anyone off limits? Don't you hold value in any life? When is it ever enough? Is there ever too high a price? I apologize, crack, because I'm asking you to feel. When all a demon knows is how to possess, distress, and kill. Erase the filth I once called home within a house so full of roaches. Restore my childhood dreams. You owe me life in double doses. Do you not know how much it hurts to look my mother in her eye? To know I cannot save her, and because of you, she will die. I savor the sound of her voice, and in my heart I say goodbye, 'cause this just might be the night that she might overdose and die. Crack, this is a personal beef, reserved strictly for me and you. I will not rest until you are extinct and I receive what is my due. You must rot for what you've done. You're a manufactured form of death. And I will implement your ruination, even if it takes my final breath.
Yeah.
I was getting ready to say, okay, that's it. And my mother's name, I think I should say that because she was a part of the community. Angela Denise Nelson. So I write under my maiden name, Nelson, is my connection to her.
And powerful, and you know, drugs wasn't my addiction, but alcohol was for 40 years. And it's just that my kids went on a ride they didn't have to go on. You know, and there wasn't a day I didn't love them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
you. I'm so grateful for you being here, and I'm so grateful you were spared from this journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a beautiful calling on you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do want to say again, I thank you for filling my cup. Okay? Because every time I come around the recovery community, like I envision my mother saying, I inspired that child. Like, come on, baby, say that poem. Say that one poem that help people. Say that one poem. And I know, and that's why I have to I'm taking it very personal, and I'm glad that my semester is wrapping up with teaching, and I'm off for the summer, because that's the one thing is that when I did my book launch, there were people that came up to me that said that it helped them to forgive. Like, they were like, I would never know, by looking at you or whatever the things, but your ability, or just even the feelings, and and there were some families that were able to, facilitate some restoration, which is really what God is about, right? And I know how it is to love somebody, because when I say I know that I was loved, and people will say, oh no, you were neglected. That wasn't all I was, though. She loved me. I don't know that I could be able to stand up here and do what I need to do and everything if I also felt she didn't love me. Like I felt her love, her and my father. I know that they both did, and then it just changed. And God is the God of restoration. He is, and the word says that we can overcome by the word of our testimony. So even though I know I don't have the personal whatever, but I still went through it, with her. And I think because of that, like there's power, right? There's power in that. And I love, so I'm pulling for you. I'm just so grateful that you just opened your arms to me the way you did. Yes, yes, please. I love me a good family. Look, I love a family. Oh, damn.
Syreeta,
Mm-hmm.
I had you, I believe, when I first come to school out of high school. I had you. I didn't know much about your story then. I came back to school 2 years ago and I graduated. But I want you to know you brought something to me today that I never got before. My husband's up there on that table. I lost him 17 days ago. With him, I also lost our 3 younger daughters because they don't belong to me. He used throughout most of their lives. He got clean on his oldest 6th birthday. And I just hope that they know that he loved them as much as you know that your mom loved you, because I worry about them awful. The oldest, I know she'll know. But that baby, she's only 7. She doesn't know life without this mom and dad too. And
Right.
I just want her to know that he loved her and her sisters more than anything in the entire world.
He did.
Yeah. And to me, love is very spiritual, right? And I do believe, I know a revelation I got when God told me, love, you can never waste love, right? But you can waste your time and energy, right? So that, and because of how kids are, they'll have those good memories. And when they're trying to reconcile things when they get older, that's a way, that people do show love the way your father loved you, because, oh, you were the highlight of his life, and just helping them, because the other things, and people will have the other things to say. And sometimes people will say that like to negate the other things. I remember I had somebody told me that my parents didn't deserve a daughter like me. What? God and his infinite wisdom, I'm exactly the daughter they needed, right? I'm exactly the one, right? Now their relationships with the other kids are not like how, but again, my memory, they needed somebody, right? Yeah, they needed somebody, right? To fight for them, to say, hey, they weren't just the addiction, they were these other things, right? So that time will come, and that love is not wasted, and they'll remember the feelings because they were real. And I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. It scares me that the baby, especially, she'll remember how being a dad's house made her feel, but she won't remember dad.
Yeah.
That just kills me.
Love you, Amber.
Yeah.
Love you too.
Dave.
I hope you come back out just to get your fix. You belong here. You belong here, and I hope I see you come back out for a little bit of Miss Heidi's good cooking.
Oh, it was good.
You know what I mean? 'Cause we got a lot of that to give, and you did a very fine job today, young lady. Thank you very much. My children are adult children. A couple of them were here tonight. My grandchildren have been running around, and
This is
so it's important. I drug my children at a very young age to Alcoholic Anonymous meetings all over West Michigan. You know what I mean? And they were all accepted, and they still are today. Like my son, he was here tonight. I remember picking him up because I used to pick him up. I work second shift, so I pick him up from kindergarten at 11:30, 11:45, and I go, "It's a beautiful day, man. You need to go to an AA meeting." Because, he's 5, I'm still early in the program. He tells me, "Dad, one of these days I want to be an alcoholic just like you, so I can go." Well, he comes around the meeting, saying an alcoholic like that wrote that case.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a blessing. Oh gosh.
I love this space when families come in and you know what I mean, and bring their people come and bring their kids, and it's a safe
Well,
I hope to see you again.
I would love to.
for everything that you shared, it's why it just brings the most joy to my heart to see the kids here and to see families restored and together on this side of things. I can't tell you how many times people are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the kids were loud or we heard and I'm like, "Are you kidding?"
No, I
That
don't
is
care.
joyful.
Yeah, it is.
That is a joyful sound to me because I know the other side of things. It wasn't always like that, and to have that time together, the last thing we would do is say, "This is a space for adults, and you gotta leave your." No, there's been enough time away from the kids. They've watched the hard stuff. Let's watch the beautiful healing part. Why don't we include them in that? And that's what we do here. Like, we recover out loud. We don't hide, and we want our kids to see this. I live forever hopeful that 4 of my 6 kids will someday want to restore a relationship with me.
Yeah.
I'll forever, my heart will have a crack in it forever until then, but at the same time, man, I'm so profoundly joyful every day for what I do have.
Right.
I am so blessed beyond words, and you were just such a good reminder for me today, and I really needed it. And I'm grateful for you and the gifts that God has given you. You're a gift.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will say this last thing. When my mom passed, my sister that's right underneath me, they had but to come to find out, she was the one that I thought it was the boyfriend, the needle thing, but it was my sister. Right there. So that came out later, right? It came out, but really my point is the regret. Because then the relationship, she would be mean, like to my mom and just do and disrespectful. And then me as the oldest, I'm like, who mom are you talking to like that, right? Like, wait a minute, hold on. Not in my presence, right? So, we would have some, but I will say that is one of the things that to this day it is the regret. And so that's another reason why when I was like, I'm not speaking. And then God, it was very clear. He's like, when you withhold, the kingdom is voice activated. So when you withhold words, you withhold life. And if I put those words in you and I gave you those words, how could you not? And that's the whole, because that piece of being, and I know what that side looks like for people to have regret. I have my regrets. When I was out getting my degrees and everything, and sometimes I would be busy, I was like, did she know that I loved her? And people was like, what you talking about? I'm like, well, one time I didn't return her call. It was on this day and this, and you start picking all this stuff, and they like, no, she knew you was like all the things, but that level of regret. And that's when I talk to the children sometime. I'm like, you don't want to have that. Like, because there is, there's a finality to it. But while you got time and you got life, this thing that you hold on to, Because guess what? My mother, when I learned more about her life, I'm like, oh, that was all she was using? Because that life, no, really, I was like, whoa. And she gave me better than she had. And she didn't get much. But she gave me better than she had. So then I became grateful at a different level. But then that also came with maturity. To like, as I got older, I started to see things differently. I never really disrespected her because it's the raised thing. Like the way you can't, like I would be upset sometime, but I'd have to feel it in my chest and I say it with my breath. But right, like, because I couldn't disrespect her, but no matter what she was doing, right? But that thing, it came with maturity. And then sometimes, but when you're in pain, it's hard to mature, So I want to be able to have that kind of space for people, for the children, no matter how old. Because I still would love to curl up under somebody and be a baby, a daughter, because I love being a daughter. And then when she was gone, I'm like, who's going to mother me? There is, right? So I'm like, I'm available. I'm taking applications. No, just kidding. Because I love being a daughter. I love being a daughter. I drive, I travel. I go to appointments with people. I don't look. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Then Robert and Heidi give a lot of good stuff on, and a lot of us have studied like the brain and addiction and stuff. Can you expand more on that? That the frontal lobe is not developed? Because I've just heard that recently, that you're in your mid or late 20s, and the decisions people are making, because we're always told you reach 16, 17, 18, and you're, supposed to be acting like an adult.
Yeah,
Because I know
no.
you study all that. Can you share more on that?
Yeah, so the frontal lobe, that's the place of your like executive function and your higher level of reasoning. So this is why if you notice like health insurance, 26, 24, 26, I think it might be up to 26, but that's the numbers.
Rental cars,
27.
26.
See, yeah, and then so that, and then also like rental cars and stuff, like all of that, why your insurance and all of that changes after that age is because the impulsivity and everything. So the world is using brain science, but they're not telling you, right? So then when you have young people who are very, impulsive, or because you don't have the higher, to be able to see down the street and around the corner, like about how things and weighing things. So it's more based off of emotion, because children are ruled more by the emotional part of their mind and the whole immediacy and all of that, and being able to act right now. And that's why you will talk to them, you say, well, what were you thinking? Well, I just wanted to do this, so I did. But you didn't think about this? Well, no, but now I know. And you're like, well, you didn't think about that before? No, because their ability to do that, they don't have it. That along with the hormones and all the other stuff that's going on. So it's brain physiology. They don't have it yet. And so Erickson, so cute, is a good one. So he talks, a lot about the different, autonomy versus shame and doubt and all these different things that we are supposed to be able, psychosocial development over depending on what your age is. And so then as you get older, so when you get in your more senior years, then you get to a point where you start looking back over your life and you want to look back and maybe pour into the next generation. But then sometimes people have regret about, oh, I got more life behind me than I have ahead of me. But it is all in science, like how these things kind of, develop or evolve over time. But yeah, they don't have that. So holding people accountable when they make decisions, like when they're so young, like for the rest of their lives, or their brains aren't fully formed. And then if you are introducing like substances and everything, so like right now was very huge, like people are doing all the vaping and then the marijuana, but then the THC. So because this is not the marijuana of yore. Right? It is this very highly potent THC. The more potent, the better. But that's the psychoactive agent. And so we're getting more and more young people that's going into psychosis from marijuana. And then the brain is not fully developed. So then you create all these other pathways and with the dopamine and all that kind of stuff. So the ability and dopamine is like the body's natural cocaine. And so you doing all this stuff, while the brain is still forming. So what it is, it's like opening more lanes. So you create more and more receptors while the brain is developing, and then all of that stuff on top, and not to mention just the normal development by itself. And this is why when kids reach a certain age, when they start getting at, in their late 20s, early 30s, a lot of times relationships, they might be a certain way as a teenager, but then when they get to be that young adult, you're like, oh, I never thought we'd get here. Well, the brain and the maturity, and they're able to look back over things. And then they also have life experience on top of it. It's like, oh, I realized you were doing the best you can. Like when I asked my mom, well, why can't you just quit? Like, just stop. You started it, just stop. Stop. And the way she looked at me, I took her to church. A Kojic church. Took her right on up to the front. She would do anything to make me happy. I wore white. I'll never forget. I was so silly. I was trying everything. I fasted, total fast for 3 days. This is the only time in my life I did a total fast for 3 days because I was getting ready to help her. And I took her to the church, and it was the only thing I wanted. The minister put oil on her tongue and said, hey, they prayed for her. They gathered around her. That night, we lived in the same apartment building, couldn't live together, but across from each other. That night, I went over there happy. And you know what she was doing? That very night, I remember crying myself to sleep that night. I felt so defeated. I'm like, oh, surely this will be it. And she really wanted. She even said she looked like a little child. She tried, but I said, I didn't know what to do. I tried everything in my power. And but my heart was in the right place, right? Like with all these things, I'm like, oh, I learned about fasting and all of this. I said, I'm going to try this and I'm going to fight with you. I'm going to do my part. You do your part. That very night, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do, right? So I needed a little break. We keep fighting, and you don't quit quitting, right? That's what you do. You keep doing the yes.
I know addiction thrives in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do here is just all community. Recovery is community, right?
Yeah.
That's the opposite. I'm just curious, what kind of community did your mom have? Did she, throughout the years, kind of just push people away, so it was more isolation, or?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So her community shifted, and it shifted a lot once she became paralyzed because she couldn't. Yeah, and then she had those she was prescribed opiates and stuff, right? So what I noticed is there might be like a bartering, like the type of people that would come around. Then she would do well for a while, and then she wouldn't. And then so she would have to go out to community. So as I look back, there was a lot of, I would say, isolation. Like I even remember that dream I had after she passed. I had a dream that she was alive in my dream. And her mom was in the front room. And I went back, I said, Mom, hold on. I'm getting ready to go talk to Granny. Cause I was like, why did you tell me my mom was alive? And I was looking for her. And it all became clear. They didn't even know. So what I was being shown, and this is the revelation that I got, is that her life was very lonely. And it wasn't uncommon. She would call, say, can you bring me something to eat? I'm like, what, you in the house with a whole bunch of people? So this was from childhood. And that's why those things that don't get healed or treated, from childhood. So she was used to kind of being on her own or just even being apart. And when she was living with her mom, which was my grandmother, to be in that environment where you have siblings that are just kind of doing the same, type of stuff. She didn't have this. Like the last time I remember her having this type of community was before she got shot. And she was going to the different treatment centers and working the program and doing the steps. And then I heard her say that she had been to so many programs that she felt like she didn't need to go to anymore. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's might be something that people, right?
The cunning, baffling, and powerful part of addiction.
Yes.
So that will convince you that I'm better at this.
Yeah, she said I'm gonna stop. Like, and I put in my book in that one part where she said that in order to say goodbye to it, she was gonna continue. She told me that. I will never forget that night. She said, I'm gonna stop smoking. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna buy a whole bunch of it and smoke it.
Yeah.
And I said, huh? She said, yeah. Then after that, I'm gonna be done. I said, oh, yeah. I'm like, okay. But it made sense to her. I'm like, oh. But she said, yeah, she didn't need to go to meetings or treatment. She said she knew what she needed to do. She was gonna buy it, she was just gonna be done. She was gonna say goodbye. Well, well. So she didn't have this. So I know that this is very important. And then I realized when she stopped, because I would go with her. And then even when she tried it, when she was in a wheelchair, I would like, if she asked me to pick her up or take her somewhere, I would. And so being in this type of community, it's interesting that there were, and I'm pretty sure, because I see how the community works, if somebody, like if she needed a ride and she was in this community, somebody would probably pick her up and bring her to this community thing, right? But what I realized is that there were more people willing to bring her drugs. But I don't think that isn't there a part of it where you supposed to not like be in relationships like for like a period of time? Because what I realized is that these different men that she had, I know for certain that she would be clean, but they would meet like in these recovery programs, like the inpatient or the.
There's a term called 13th stepping. It's kind of.
Okay, and so they would meet there and then they leave together. And yeah, and I was noticed that a lot of times they would start and she would be okay for a minute and then if they left or moved on, like that would be hard and it would be hard for her to get out. And so that was.
Speaking of brain health stuff, like the breakup for somebody actually mimics a withdrawal. And that's why they tell people in early recovery, no relationships.
See, I could see that.
Give it 2 years. Right?
And she didn't do that.
Yeah.
I could see that. Like because I remember her crying so hard. And I'm like, Mom, why are you so? And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, just get another one. I'm like, there's so many of them in the world. Like, I was like, you haven't had a problem. And I was like, and I knew what it was. That was a different kind of cry. It's like, I gave up, I was fine. And then now they left me like this. Like, it was a different kind of a pain. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I know that was a part of it too. When she was by herself, like she could do a lot of different things, but that relational piece, like, was so, and especially too, after she was in that wheelchair, it was like, she felt maybe, I don't know, her options.
Is unbelievably hard, but to have such a complication as something as awful as what happened and being wheelchair confined just adds a whole nother level of hard to trying to navigate recovery. And sometimes I have a former career in the medical field, and I was a paramedic instructor and dealt with that aspect. And sometimes people, when they come from a place of such profound hurt or trauma or that, it's almost like I can find my way to I may not understand why they were so young yet. It seemed like there should have been so much more life. But God is so good and so loving and so merciful that sometimes freedom from that means we come live with Him. And it's a hard thing, but it helps me in those moments when I just can't make sense of it. Like, but why? Like, that's way too young. I hear 51 and I'm like, I'm almost 60. I just, like, it gets younger and younger and younger. But yeah.
You're right. There's more than one way to be free.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that. She doesn't have that chair. She's not confined to that chair.
Free as she has ever been.
I'm like, And I guess if I had to choose, between the arms of Jesus and being here, even though I was a good daughter. I mean, you know, we pretty amazing. Yeah. I'm like,
We're
me,
not Big G.
Big G, me, Big G. I was like, okay, Big G, I guess you're right. And that's what
I want a Big G shirt.
yeah. Wouldn't that be a good shirt? Big G. Big G, not the little. Right?
I'm down with Big G.
Yeah.
Down with Big
Next Sunday, that might be on me, so we'll see.
G.
Syreeta, thank you.
Yes.
So very much.
You're
Can we give her
welcome.
one round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a standing invitation to come visit us anyways. You come through the door, that means you're part of this family. And can I just say that was just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Syreeta, what do you teach at MCC?
Oh, psychiatric nursing.
Oh, wonderful.
The
That's
theory and the clinicals and medical terminology, and the very first class before you get in the nursing program is college success for nursing.
nice. Nice. I'm glad they have someone like you to teach
I know.
courses like that.
We've
It's
been
an
told that
important
we
part.
need to do the hookup down at MCC. I guess they got a pool and a bunch of like, they were
Yeah.
like, you need to do a sober not boring down there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I already
Alright.
sent the email requesting, I already sent that email saying we wanna partner.
We've been on the trails back there. Have you been on the phone? You haven't, have you seen the phone? You haven't been on the trails?
No.
Oh,
It's a
oh.
phone, it's not connected, but if there's somebody that you just miss and wanna talk to,
That's so
I
beautiful.
went out there
It's a
and
phone to
I
nowhere
just sat
or
there and
whatever, so.
I worried a little bit, but I just told my mom that I hope she's really happy.
Yeah.
And say hi to Jesus for me, and that I love you.
That is so
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, it's a cool little thing. MCC, they got some trails back behind the college, and
Beautiful.
there's
love.
a phone to nowhere. And it's just this beautiful little phone all set up, and
Muskegon too,
Yeah.
and Lakewood ones are some
Yeah.
suicide. I put one up there. for
Yeah,
people.
beautiful.
Yep.
It was a special moment.
if you have a court slip or anything that needs an autograph, I'm autographing papers for, I don't know, a few minutes here.
And if you're celebrating a milestone and want to ring a bell, we can. I'm never opposed to that. I like ringing the bell,
Absolutely.
letting people
I
know
think I might
that
ring
freedom
the bell.
happens. Oh, it's a milestone
It
day
is
for
a
me.
milestone day for you.
It is. What's
Yeah.
January, February, March, April, May? We got 24, 25, 6, 27?
27 months?
27 months.
Okay, yeah, we'll take it.
Today. What do
If
you
there's
think?
anybody else celebrating milestone, the bell is open. We're gonna be here for probably the next hour, so you don't gotta leave now, but I'm done entertaining you.
Thank you,
Yes, love you
everybody.
guys.
I got something entertaining.
What?
I got you.
I'm gonna